Hello everyone and welcome back to Affinity for Commander. My name's Martin.
And my name is Alex.
Before we begin, we have a couple of announcements to make. First of all, we would like to thank EDH Rec for their advice and support regarding the growth of our channel and for sharing our videos on Twitter. It really means a lot to us that you would take the time to help out a small channel such as ours, and we truly appreciate it. If you're not familiar with EDH Rec, I would highly recommend checking out their website for all of your Commander deck building needs. There's a link in the description.
Secondly, we would like to thank Andy, Koo and Sam from Netherworld Chester for allowing us to film in their store. Keep an eye out for this change of scenery in the videos to come. And with that out the way, let's get straight into the gameplay.
I'm playing my Gishath Sun's Avatar deck. I keep an opening hand containing Ranging Raptors, Trapjaw Tyrant, Bellowing Aegisaur, Temple of Triumph, Nea Panorama, Kessig Wolfrun, and a forest.
My commander is Karametra, God of Harvests. My opening hand consists of Eidolon of Blossoms, Dragonlord Dramoka, Burgeoning, Crufix's Insight, Nykthos, Shrine to Nyx, Tranquil Thicket, and a forest.
Tom's deck is led by Sram, Senior Edificer. He starts the game with a hand of Selfless Spirit, Tajnar Swordsmith, Cultivator's Caravan, Griff's Boon, and 3 planes.
And finally, Phil's commander is Borborygmos Enraged. He keeps an opening hand containing Realms Uncharted, Jungle Basin, Mountain Valley, Raging Ravine, Gaia Reach Sanitarium, Maze of Ith, and a forest.
Alex won the dice roll and goes first. He plays a forest and casts Burgeoning. The turn 1 ramp spell Sol Ring wishes it could be. He then passes the turn.
For Tom's turn, he plays a Plains. I respond to this by putting a Tranquil Thicket into play tapped. And Tom ends his turn.
I play a Temple of Plenty as my land for turn, to which Alex plays a Nykthos Shrine to Nyx thanks to Burgeoning. I resolve my Scry trigger and keep the card on top of my library. I then pass to Phil.
In his turn, Phil plays a Raging Ravine, which enters tapped. I unfortunately have no more lands in hand, so proceed to my turn normally.
During his turn, Alex casts Crufix's Insight. He reveals Declaration in Stone, Homeward Path, Secure the Wastes, Faith's Fetters, Eternal Witness, and a forest. In summary, not what he was hoping for. Alex puts the only legal target of Faith's Fetters to his hand and then passes the turn, missing his land drop.
Tom plays a Plains for turn, and then casts his commander, Sram Senior Edificer. He then passes turn to Martin.
I continue with my theme of tap lands and play a Temple of Triumph. I scry again and keep the card on top of my library. I then pass the turn.
During Phil's turn, he plays Mountain Valley and then passes to me.
Alex top decks a Plains and plays it as his land for turn. He then casts Eidolon of Blossoms, whose ability triggers upon entering the battlefield, and Alex draws a card. He then passes the turn.
For Tom's turn, he plays a Plains and then casts Cultivator's Caravan. This triggers Shram's ability and Tom draws a card. He then taps the Caravan to generate a white mana to cast Griff's Boon and enchants Sram. This also triggers Shram's ability once more, drawing another card. Tom then moves to combat and attacks me with a Flying Sharam. Unable to block, I take 3 damage and 3 commander damage. Tom then passes the turn.
In my turn I play a forest. I then cast Ranging Raptors and pass the turn to Phil.
In his upkeep, Phil sacrifices Mountain Valley to find a basic forest and puts it into play. He plays a forest as his land for turn and then casts Crucible of Worlds. He then passes turn.
During his turn, Alex casts Mana Bloom with X being 0. Eidolon of Blossoms triggers and Alex draws a card. He then casts Ghostly Prison in an attempt to stave off the attacks of one particular flying dwarf. Eidolon triggers and Alex draws a card. Alex then plays Greypelt Refuge as his land for turn, gaining a life when it enters the battlefield. He then passes to Tom.
Tom, to everyone's awe and surprise, plays a Plains. He then casts Lightning Greaves and draws another card from Shram's ability. He then equips Lightning Greaves to Shram. Tom then casts Selfless Spirit for added Shram protection, followed by a Hedron Blade. This once again triggers Sram and Tom draws a card. Unable to attack me, Tom elects to attack Phil for having such sick value from his Crucible of Worlds. Phil takes 3 damage and 3 commander damage. Tom then passes to Martin.
For my turn, I play a Nea Panorama and then cast Iroas, God of Victory. Unable to do anything else, I pass the turn.
Phil plays a Gaia Reach Sanitarium, because who doesn't love looting? He then passes to me.
In Alex's upkeep, Mana Bloom returns to his hand. He then replays Mana Bloom with 0 counters on it to draw a card from Eidolon of Blossoms. He then taps Nykthos, Shrine to Nyx, and 2 other lands to generate 4 green mana. Alex uses 3 of these mana to play a Courser of Kruphix, revealing a Sigil of the Empty Throne before drawing it from Eidolon's trigger. He then reveals Wrath of God to be on top of his library. Using the remaining green mana from Nykthos, Alex casts Ground Seal, which lets him draw 1 card from the Eidolon and 1 from the seal itself. These cards turn out to be Wrath of God and Authority of the Consoles. He then reveals Oblivion Ring as being on top of his library and discards down to 7 before passing the turn.
Tom starts off his turn by playing Captain's Claws, drawing a card from Sram. He then plays Imperial Plate, drawing another card. Tom then moves the Lightning Greaves from Sram onto the Selfless Spirit so he can equip Imperial Plate to Sram. For the rest of the game, we accept this as a shortcut to avoid the shroud given by Lightning Greaves as long as Tom has another creature on the battlefield that can be equipped with the Greaves. He then re-equips the Lightning Greaves to Sram. Unable to pay the 2-mana tax to attack me, Tom attacks Martin with his now 9 power commander. Unable to block the flying Sram, Martin takes 9 damage and 9 commander damage. Tom then passes the turn.
For my turn, I play a Kessig Wolfrun and then cast Trapjaw Tyrant. Going to combat, I attack Tom with the Ranging Raptors to repay him for attacking me with Sram. He declares no blockers and takes 2 damage. In my end step, Phil activates Gaia Reach Sanitarium and we all draw and then discard a card. Alex then reveals Karmic Justice to be on top of his library. I then pass the turn.
Phil casts Rites of Flourishing, allowing everyone to play an additional land and draw an additional card for their turn. For his 2 lands this turn, Phil replays his Mountain Valley from his graveyard and plays a Temple of the False God from his hand. He then passes to me.
Mana Bloom returns to Alex's hand in his upkeep and he draws his Karmic Justice, revealing and drawing Plea for Guidance as well. He then reveals that Darksteel Mutation is on top of his library. Alex activates Nykthos to add 6 green mana to his mana pool and casts Mana Bloom for 0 yet again, drawing Darksteel Mutation and revealing a Plains. He then plays the Plains from the top of his library with Courser's ability, gaining 1 life and revealing Pacifism as the next card in his library. Alex then casts his commander, Karametra, God of Harvests. He draws Pacifism and reveals another Plains, which he plays as his second land for turn and gains 1 more life. This reveals Sylvan Caryatid as his next card. Alex plays Karmic Justice, drawing Sylvan Caryatid and revealing Nylia's presence in its place. He then moves to his end step, discarding Pacifism, Dragonlord Jamoka and Sylvan Caryatid to reduce his hand back down to 7.
Tom plays 2 Plains, and then separates his land into 2 piles, keeping the tax required to attack me to one side. He then casts a Pure Steel Paladin, and equips Captain's Claws and Hedron Blade to Sram for free thanks to the Paladin's ability. Tom then realises how good Ghostly Prison is, so decides to cast one of his own. Moving to combat, he declares Sram as an attacker at me, paying the 2 mana for my Ghostly Prison. This triggers Captain's Claws and creates a 1/1 core ally token that is also attacking. Tom decides to send the token at Phil, being the only person without any blockers. I take the 9 damage and 9 commander damage, and Phil takes 1. Tom then passes the turn.
For my turn, I cast Sol Ring, which I then tap to play a Gruul Signet. Moving to combat, I attack Phil with my Trapjaw Tyrant for 5. Unable to block, he takes the damage. In my end step, Phil casts Realms Uncharted, searching for Stomping Ground, Wooded Foothills, Thawing Glaciers, and Vesuva. Phil asks me to pick where the cards end up, and I put Wooded Foothills and Vesuva into his hand, and Stomping Grounds and Thawing Glacier into his graveyard. I then pass the turn.
During his upkeep, Phil sacrifices the Mountain Valley to put a Cinderglade onto the battlefield untapped. For his 2 lands for the turn, Phil plays a Thawing Glaciers and a Maze of Ith. He then passes turn to me.
Mana Bloom once again returns to Alex's hand and he draws Nylea's Presence and a forest, revealing Viridian Enchantress on top of his library. He plays a forest and gains 1 life. Mana Bloom is then cast yet again for 0, letting Alex draw Viridian Enchantress, revealing his next card to be a forest. He plays the forest, gaining another life, and revealing his next card to be a Reliquary Tower. Alex then casts Nykthos and adds 8 green mana to his mana pool. He then casts Sigil of the Empty Throne in an attempt to create some flying blockers. He draws a card from Eidolon of Blossoms and reveals a forest on top of his library. Alex then casts Nylea's Presence, drawing that forest, and revealing and drawing another forest. He then reveals his next draw to be Suspension Field. Casting Nylea's Presence also triggers Sigil of the Empty Throne, creating a 4/4 Angel token with flying. Alex then casts Oblivion Ring, targeting Tom's Selfless Spirit, once again causing Sigil of the Empty Throne to trigger and making another 4/4 Angel. Tom responds by sacrificing his Selfless Spirit to give all of his creatures indestructible until the end of turn. Alex then draws Suspension Field and reveals a Soul Ring to be on top of his library. Moving to combat, Alex attacks Tom with Karametra, paying 2 for Tom's Ghostly Prison. Tom declares no blocks and takes 6 damage. Alex then passes the turn, confident that his life total is now safely being guarded by his duo of flying blockers.
During his turn, Tom plays Swiftfoot Boots, letting him draw a card from Sram and a card from Pure Steel Paladin. He then proceeds to cast Mother of Runes, causing me to sweat just a little bit. Tom then equips Mother of Runes with Swiftfoot Boots to give her Hexproof and Haste. Oh dear. He then casts Loxodon Warhammer, drawing 2 cards once more. Before moving to combat, Tom equips his Lightning Greaves to Pure Steel Paladin and then uses Mother of Rune's ability to give Sram protection from white before re-equipping the Lightning Greaves to Sram. He then moves to combat and attacks me with Sram, paying the 2 mana for my Ghostly Prison. This triggers Captain's Clause, creating another 1/1 core ally token that Tom has enter the battlefield, attacking Phil. To this, Phil responds by activating Maze of Ith and stopping a whopping 1 damage from getting through. Due to my angels being white, I am unable to block and so take a lethal 15 more commander damage, and Tom gains 15 life thanks to Loxodon Warhammer. This causes me to be knocked out of the game by one swole hammer-wielding flying dwarf. Tom then passes the turn to Martin.
In my turn, both Phil and I agree that being 1-hit KO'd by a flying dwarf doesn't seem like much fun, and so decide to team up to stop him before we both die. To this end, I cast Thrashing Brontodon. I then cast Drover of the Mighty and sacrifice my Brontodon to destroy Tom's Lightning Greaves. Moving to combat, I attack Tom with my Ranging Raptors, paying 2 for Tom's Ghostly Prison. He chooses to block with his 2 core ally tokens, which is necessary due to my Raptors having Menace thanks to Iroas. After damage, the 2 tokens die and my Raptor's Enrage ability triggers. I go and find a basic Plains from my library and put it onto the battlefield tapped. In my end step, Phil activates the Sanatorium and we all loot. Once this has resolved, Phil casts Frozen Grip on Tom's Swiftfoot Boots, destroying them. I then pass the turn.
For Phil's turn, he plays a Strip Mine and a Forest. He then casts his commander, Borborygmos Enraged. Phil then takes this opportunity of a tapped out Tom and a tapped out Mother of Runes to use his commander's ability, discarding a Desert of the Indomitable to deal 3 damage to Mother of Runes, and discards a Forest to deal 3 damage to Pure Steel Paladin as well. Phil then passes the turn.
During his turn, Tom casts a Recruiter of the Guard. Tom tutors up Restoration Specialist, which he then plays. He then immediately sacrifices it to return Lightning Greaves to his hand. Tom then casts Lightning Greaves, allowing Tom to draw from Sram. Tom then moves to equip his Lightning Greaves to Sram, to which Phil responds by activating Borborygmos' ability, discarding an Evolving Wilds to deal 3 damage to my Trapjaw Tyrant. I target Sram with the Tyrant's Enrage ability, exiling him. Tom instead elects for his commander to go to his command zone, a wise move considering his cheap casting cost. Tom then equips the Lightning Greaves to his Recruiter of the Guard and passes the turn.
In Martin's upkeep, Phil activates Thawing Glaciers to put a mountain onto the battlefield tapped. Martin then casts Hull Breach, targeting and destroying Tom's ghostly prison and lightning greaves. He then casts his commander Gishath, Sun's Avatar. Moving to combat, Martin attacks Tom with Gishath and Phil with Trapjaw Tyrant. In response, Phil activates Maze of Ith on the Trapjaw Tyrant to untap it and remove it from combat. Unable to block due to Iros giving Gishath Menace, Tom is forced to take the 7 damage. Gishath then triggers and Martin reveals the top 7 cards of his library. He then puts Temple Altasaur, Colossal Dreadmaw, Snapping Sailback and Thundering Spineback into play. One army of dinosaurs later, he passes the turn to Phil, who returns Thawing Glaciers to his hand during Martin's cleanup step. Gotta love the wording on old cards.
In Phil's turn, he casts Grafted Exoskeleton, and then equips it to Borborygmos. Because if you can't win by dealing 21 commander damage, why not reduce that amount to 10 infect damage? Phil then plays Gruul Turf from his graveyard with Crucible of Worlds, bouncing a mountain to his hand. Phil's second land for turn is Jungle Basin, which he also plays from his graveyard. This returns an untapped forest from play to his hand. I then experience the interaction between Borborygmos' ability and Infect for the first time as Phil discards 4 lands to his commander's ability, dealing 12 Infect damage to me. This gives me 12 poison counters, knocking me out of the game. Phil then discards his last land to Borborygmos to deal 3 Infect damage to Tom. He casts Wheel of Fortune, causing himself and Tom to discard their hands and draw 7 new cards. Unfortunately, Phil didn't draw enough land to simply defeat Tom using Borborygmos' ability. However, Phil then realised that Tom only had a puny creature with which to block with, and attacks Tom with a 9/8 creature with Trample and Infect. Tom blocks with his Recruiter of the Guard, but still takes 8 Infect damage, putting him at 11 poison counters. This knocks him out of the game, leaving Phil as the victor.
So that's it for this week's episode. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more, and tell us what you think of the match down below in the comments. See you next time.